The world of small luxury crossovers is pretty populated. We not only have the X1 by BMW and the GLA by Mercedes-Benz, but also the Mini Countryman kind of fights in the same category. And then of course we have the Volvo XC40, which also is available in an all-electric form. And that's exactly the car that this one, the Lexus UX 300e, largely will compete against, because this is all-electric, as you would have guessed by the color of the number plate. What exactly is this UX 300e really like is what we are trying to find out. So let's go. If you've been in any of the Lexuses in the past, what comes to mind is great luxury, absolute refinement, brilliant peace of mind with the brand. And all that is essentially what has taken Lexus to global recognition, to be honest. And the UX 300e is genuinely a good-looking car as well. You may, of course, have a great debate on how practical it is, because it is really not all that practical, and we'll come to that later. But it is a very, very good-looking car, and I think the front end is absolutely spot on, and even the rear, with those protruding tail lamps, is really nice and very well executed. But you will find, if you have the flexibility enough to check the underbody, that there is a bit of a portion of plastic that runs around, and that is essentially the cover for the whole battery pack. And that really reduces the capability of the UX, because the ground clearance is that much more reduced from the regular standard UX. So far, and especially because we have been restrained enough, this thing has not really scraped its belly or given us any sort of problems. And yeah, I think it works pretty well, even on typical Indian roads with all the potholes and everything. Well, that was all about the exterior. I think it's a very smart-looking car on the outside. It's quite a similar story on the inside as well. Well, not exactly, but in a lot of ways, it's genuinely very pleasing. And when I first saw the treatment of the cabin in pictures, I did not think that it's going to look very good, this blue and white combination. But in reality, when you look at it in person, it looks absolutely fantastic. And it's finished off in brilliant quality. What I also like is the fact that you have genuine, proper physical buttons for some of the controls, in fact quite a lot of controls, and that is no bad thing. I think for all your regular things that you use too often, the fact that you don't have to hunt them down in the menus and the sub-menus on a touchscreen is a very cool thing, because you don't have to take your eyes off. Your muscle memory is going to do all the work for you. And when you're sitting in the cabin, you will notice that the screen is inset. It's not really out here along with the vents. It's pushed back, and it is not a touch screen. Again, something that is a very weird sort of a decision by Lexus. Also, you will not be able to reach it. So yeah, it's all okay, because this thing is operated by this trackpad over here, and it takes time getting used to, but once you do, it's all pretty okay. But again, this is very, very different, novel, and something that is also borderline eccentric. And on the topic of infotainment, the screen is actually just about average. It responds okay, but just the look and feel of it is not something that we've come to expect from manufacturers that are doing these kind of things in 2022. The graphics have moved to a very, very different level, the sharpness, and also just the finesse of everything, the system overall. I think Lexus still has some way to go in that part. Another very interesting control module is here, right at the top of the center armrest, and what this lets you do is control the radio or the entertainment that you're playing on the screen. So the volume can be adjusted through this dial over here, and if you want to change tracks or the radio station, then there is a dial over here on the side. And it's just very unique, but also extremely convenient. Another thing that's very convenient is the fact that the armrest, which also doubles up as a compartment to store some things, is double hinged, so you can actually open it from both sides. So the driver has a button over here. You can open it like this. You can open it like this. And you will love the eccentricity of design by these elements as well. These are stalks coming out at the top of this part of the dashboard, and this is for the drive modes. You have normal, you have eco and sport. And to be honest, yes, of course, in sport mode, you do get a little bit of a move on and the throttle response is crisper, but just put it in normal mode and you'll absolutely be fine with it. Eco just kind of behaves in the same way as a normal, but just dial down a little bit. You'll not really have a lot of difference between the eco and the normal mode. And over here is your stability off. So yeah, just don't play around with this one. Another thing that I absolutely love is the design of this gear lever. I know that this is an automatic. It's not really going to engage me in an edge pattern shift, but just to be able to go from the center position, pull it towards the right and then get into the drive mode by pulling it back, or then go into the B mode, it's just fantastic. And yeah, when you start off, you will really enjoy this whole movement, and it just has this amazingly fluid feel. It's all very nicely done. So again, something that is really nicely finished off. But the UX 300e is a great sign of things to come from Lexus in the battery electric segment. We've all known Lexus for hybrids, and this, a proper full BEV experience, hasn't been bad at all. It's extremely silent, it's very refined, it's a very serene experience when you're driving it, and on comfort, the suspension is just fantastic and the front seats are beautiful. So if you're a very nuclear family with a couple or just two people, this thing is going to be fantastic. And the moment you decide to get a few grown-ups in the back, that's when you will be listening to a lot of foul words because the space and the comfort is just not up there. Now let's talk about the way the UX 300e drives, and I genuinely like the way it does. There is a sense of fluidity to its steering wheel, and why I say this is because if you experience or drive a BMW, for example, it's kind of sharp and it doesn't flow, and this thing, with the linearity on the rack that it has, and also with the great suspension quality that it has, it just kind of feels like everything is bonded together very well, and it's beautiful as an experience just flowing around. But you have to bear in mind that this thing is a heavy car. It's at about 1.8 tons, so you definitely are moving a lot of mass for what the size essentially is of the UX 300e. And this thing is a front-wheel drive layout, so you will definitely have understeer if you're trying to push this around some bends in a slightly more aggressive way. But if you just drive it at about 6/10, 7/10, just dial back a little bit, it is going to be a very nice experience. And again, it's largely to do with the suspension. It's so nice and so comforting. It absorbs everything and it's silent in its operation as well. And then, of course, this car itself is extremely silent. It all just comes together to give you a serene driving experience. And then, of course, as I said, the fluidity of the steering wheel just makes everything a lot better. Now, when it comes to figures, this thing has a battery pack made of 288 cells, does about 54 kilowatt hour and makes 200 horsepower and 300 Newton meter. And you know, that's actually quite decent. It moves pretty well, and you really will not find yourself wanting more performance in this, especially because of the kind of car that the UX 300e is. This thing will not egg you on, but at the same time, the moment you put your foot down, you just get propelled, and that instant surge is something that is going to definitely bring a smile to your face. But at the same time, even if you drive it at half throttle, it's plenty good, and that is where it feels the happiest as well. So yeah, I think this is a half throttle car. And talking of throttle, this is not a single pedal car because the region is just not great and not aggressive as we have come to expect in many other cars. You get a two-stage region in this, but the ferocity of retardation is not there. It's all very slow and laid back, and that's why you will have to work the brake pedal as well. Now with the setup of the battery pack and the single motor drivetrain, which of course is mounted at the front axle, drives the front wheels, the range that you get is, or at least what Lexus claims, is about 300 kilometers. But I'm not so sure because this thing has definitely not been driven in a very aggressive way for a major part. And yet we are just under the half charge mark and we only have about 105 kilometers of range. Just being very, very simple on calculations, this is going to be about 200, 210, maximum 250 odd kilometers of range. And that is not big at all, because in the marketplace, when you have other manufacturers talking about 500 and 600 kilometers of range, Lexus comes around with its first battery electric vehicle and says, hey, you know what, we'll give you 250 or 300, optimistically. That's not an argument. That's not going to be in its favor at all. So yeah, range is definitely on the lower end of the spectrum. But as we go along, of course, in other cars, especially when they are completely bespoke, all electric platforms, it is going to improve, and I hope it improves substantially. Charging. Now that is also a big, curious question mark for the UX300E. You get two charging ports. The one on the right is for your home charger or the wall mount charger, and one on the right is for the DC charger. And again, this thing doesn't charge at a very high rate. I think with a wall mount, if you plug that in to a 32 ampere socket, it's going to charge at about 8 or 9 hours, so overnight. But if you have a 13 amp setup, then it's going to take as long as 19 hours to charge up the battery. And on the DC side of things, it's going to take about an hour, hour and a half to give it full juice. And that is again not at the same level or not in the same ballpark as the other products in the segment. One very weird thing is the fact that Lexus has opted for a CHAdeMO or a CHAdeMO charger, not the CCS, which is kind of almost a universal charger. So the availability of CHAdeMO is something that is going to be a big question mark as well. And the UX300E comes with a little ADAS support as well. You have lane keep assist, and this is not just a warning. You get a warning, of course, but it is also going to identify the lane markings and will correct the steering if at all it sees you veering off from the lane. So overall, the UX300E is a fantastically stylish crossover that is extremely comfortable for the passengers in the front. The suspension is absolutely glorious. The whole cabin has a sense of solidity but also eccentricity in design, and yeah, I think as a sign of things to come from Lexus in the whole fully battery electric range, this is not a bad step at all.